Hi there. Welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I have Joanna Strait with me. Joanna, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
I am especially delighted, and I'm going to date myself a little bit though, because I used to see your middle child when he was only two
Yep.
and
Yeah,
he's 14.
I know it's crazy. Um, Feels like a lot of time and no time at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to have stayed connected and to be kind of connecting with you on this side of things.
Yes. And I'm delighted that, yes, you and I are going to get to talk because we never did back in the day. Um, and you have a particular specialty. So tell the good people a little bit
Yeah.
about your professional life and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I am a clinical social worker and I have been in private practice now for a little over 10 years. I am licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and I specialize in seeing adults um, within kind of the realm of reproductive mental health. So a majority of the people who I work with are kind of needing support around some type of topic that has to do with everything from deciding, do I want to have kids, to um, fertility, infertility support, prenatal, postpartum. I provide a lot of support around perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And I also have a uh, clinical history of working kind of at a hospice, and because of that, got really into kind of grief work. And so I do a lot of work around grief and loss, but specifically within the reproductive kind of time frame. So a lot of work with people on miscarriage, stillbirth, um, and sometimes for people who haven't been able or haven't been successful in getting pregnant, kind of navigating, right? When do I stop? Right? What would it mean to have a life that's fulfilling and meaningful without kids? So I'm really kind of all over the spectrum, but specialize in kind of all things related to reproductive and maternal mental health.
I I just first of all want to express appreciation for that niche because I think number one, it's something that women need,
Hmm.
particularly women, and um, yeah, it's so needed, and I think we don't have enough conversation, enough awareness about all of the different choices that we can make
Hmm.
as women of a reproductive age,
Yeah.
including deciding not to have children
Yeah.
or including to stop fertility treatments, even though the doctor says maybe there's one more chance,
Yeah.
which I imagine is something that comes up sometimes. And so
Yeah. Yes.
it's really anyway. I'm having big feelings about your specialty.
Well, thank you for that support.
Yeah. So today we are going to sort of niche down even more and talk about um, single parenting by choice
Hmm.
and walk us through kind of some of, or start wherever you like in terms of why does that deserve its own conversation?
Yeah. I think in so many good ways, there is more acceptance of the fact that the traditional family does not have to be the only way to create a family. There is so much science now through artificial reproductive technologies to support people or persons who want to get pregnant who otherwise wouldn't be able to. Right. So the kind of choices around reproductive, around fertility are more nuanced now than ever. And part of that I find, especially kind of in this particular area, I would imagine in most metropolitan areas, but certainly in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, um, a lot of people are very career focused, which is great. and right can mean that people have established or have worked on their career in a non-traditional way. And then sometimes that means that people have put off, right, partnering, getting married. Sometimes people have kind of decided that they're going to focus on their career and more financial stability before they're going to consider whether or not they kind of want to be a parent. And so I think because of that, what we see is more people making different decisions around fertility choices, reproductive choices, um, and also, right, and part of that becomes a decision too around there's unfortunately still the biological pressure that comes with fertility and reproduction, even if you're talking about IVF or kind of other fertility procedures. And I think one area where people kind of continue to struggle is if it matters, and one of the things that they really care about and want in their life is to be a parent, but they're not following kind of the quote unquote traditional path to that. What are their options? How do they even think about what those options are? I work with lots of clients who hope to be partnered but are not, and are feeling kind of that pressure from the biological clock to really think about, okay, I need to make some decisions here around, do I want children? Am I willing to have children if I'm not partnered? And so I see a lot more clients kind of coming in, and it only increases in terms of kind of wanting to make really thoughtful decisions around becoming a parent or not becoming a parent, and finding support and finding kind of a non-judgmental space, because well-meaning family and friends always have opinions, again, even if they're coming from a very supportive place. And so I find that this is coming up kind of a lot more for clients that I see, and it can be a really nuanced and complicated space to kind of navigate through, despite the fact that as a society, I do think we are heading in the right direction in terms of having it be more socially acceptable to be a single parent by choice, and having more conversations. We're still absolutely like not there. Um, right? We're headed in the right direction, but not quite there. And so there's there's a lot that comes up in terms of mental health for people when they are considering these decisions that are quite important and hold a lot of weight in terms of, do I want to be a parent? Do I not want to be a parent? And everything in between.
It's so interesting, right? And I know there will be people listening who are saying, how could you possibly? And that's fine if whatever's true for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, I would never want to have children all on my own. That's great. That's not what we're talking about today,
Right.
but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you navigate? What is the process of helping somebody navigate this decision of to have a child? Essentially, I mean, you can't do it alone, so with assistance, but where you're the only parent, where they are the only parent, particularly in a world that says, well, that I'll speak for myself, that looks really hard.
Mm-hmm.
um so what's the mix of like reality check, desire check? I don't know, what are the things?
Yeah. So when someone comes to me, the first thing that I really try to work with them on is kind of backing up, right? I think oftentimes clients who come in feel a lot of that kind of biological time clock pressure to be making decisions as quickly as possible. And that, that never feels good. It doesn't feel good to feel like you're making major life decisions from a place of fear, from a place of anxiety. And so the first step is to kind of slow down and back up a little bit to kind of talk about, right, how did or didn't you think about what this phase of life would be like for you growing up, right? What kind of role models did you have? have you known that you've always wanted to be a parent or not? How has that kind of, right, has that kind of like narrative happened for you that leads you kind of up to where you are now coming in? And to also really talk about what are some of the expectations and assumptions that they have and hold around what it means to be a parent. Um, right? Some of those are realistic, some of those maybe are not realistic, but I think really challenging kind of those like internal stories um, to really get at what is it about not being a parent or being a parent that feels um, so important, right? Because if it wasn't so important, they wouldn't be seeing me. Um,
It's
and
so interesting. Sorry, can I interrupt you for just a
yes,
second?
yes,
I
please.
happen to think that anybody of childbearing age who's considering having children should be having this conversation with
Yeah,
someone.
yeah,
And,
right.
maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a pastor, I don't know, but um it's so interesting to me that we have all of these assumptions
Hmm.
around parenting that really go unexamined. And, the title of this podcast is the Complicated Kids Podcast. Until we have something complicated happen in our life, we don't question it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's really interesting and strange to me, anyway.
yeah. And I find that so much of my work with people, whether it's around deciding to be a single parent or, right, even if you're partnered and thinking about, do I want kids? And, right, that whole journey is about kind of crisis can happen for people when expectations of what that time is going to feel like, look like, be like, don't match reality.
Oh, say that again.
Crisis can happen for people when their expectations of any phase, frankly, in life, right? When the expectations don't match up with reality. And I think, you know, certainly the reproductive kind of phase of people's lives, there's so much that is out of your control. And so for very few people, does reality 100% match up with what their expectations of what this time period and what these decisions are going to kind of feel like and be like? And that's true even in terms of what are your expectations for how much you're going to enjoy or like being pregnant and how much you're going to enjoy or like having a newborn versus a 1 year old versus a 5 year old, right? And I think that is a space that comes up with almost every single client that I work with because it is really hard to reconcile, right? And there can be a lot of grief around not having the journey look like you thought it would or hoped it would.
Has that changed in the past 10 years that you've been doing your practice? It occurs to me that Instagram plays a big role here, even more than Facebook. I feel like because it's so image based. Do you see the effect of social media on your work?
Yes, I certainly do, in both helpful and not helpful ways. Right, I think there is kind of certainly in the last 10 years, but there is on Instagram, part of what can be really hard is that you're seeing kind of, right, like what people want you to see. And oftentimes those are things that align with what are your expectations, not what is reality. Um, right. And so that often, I think, can set people up to have unrealistic expectations of this curated life where you're really only seeing the positives. But on the flip side, there are also communities and certainly people on social media who are committed to kind of telling more of a realistic story, right? And so it's a fine balance between kind of how do I find community on Instagram that feels like it's validating me and supporting me where I am, and where I'm also being really mindful of when it's actually kind of setting me up for disappointment and unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, it strikes me. It's just like added to the list of things to think about and not
Yeah.
just kind of passively trip through life.
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
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 So are there a couple of like particular topics that are unique to, let's say I have decided I'm
Hmm.
going to be a single parent by choice? What are the common threads that are worth kind of pulling at when that decision, once that decision has been made?
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that I think, and what's interesting is that I think that there has been this almost stereotype that people who are single parents by choice have rushed into that decision or kind of, right, like impulsively decided that they want to be a parent and have just kind of gone for it, which could not be farther from the truth, especially because so many people who choose single parenthood also have to go through the lengthy process of, right, how am I going to get pregnant and what technologies do I want to use or not use? And right, so I think one of the stereotypes that I've found to be so kind of off base is that kind of impulsive piece. And I find that people who are and choose single parenthood by choice are some of the most thoughtful people who I work with, right? And they in some really great ways, have spent so much time thinking about all of the wonderful things, but also all of the realistic things, right? About how hard it might be, right? I very commonly hear kind of like, I don't know if I could do this alone. Am I strong enough? Do I make enough money? Right? Would I emotionally be able to support a child on my own? Um, how will my child feel about being raised and only having one parent? So a lot of that kind of thought work is stuff that people who choose single parenthood by choice are actually sometimes even more thoughtful about
Mm.
um, in a really great way. And so I see a lot of that coming up and right, kind of helping people kind of tangle. Yeah, there's the reality of, right, for all of us, of how hard it is to be a parent. And that can be from a financial perspective, that can be from a social perspective, that can be, right. I mean, there's so many different things that are asked of us as parents. Um, and so when someone has decided, okay, I definitely want to be a single parent by choice, a lot of the work is about kind of walking through with them what are the fears and concerns you have, and can we kind of talk through those? Because oftentimes there's work that can be done during that process, which is kind of an ongoing journey, right? And as a social worker, I always focus heavily on the systems piece, right? Like community being a really, really important one. And sometimes people come to me and they have full family support and family that's local and wants to be involved and right and they feel like yes, I'm going to be a single parent by choice, but I won't be doing this alone. I
Mhm.
feel very well supported by others around me. Other times that's definitely not the case and it feels like family or friends are not supportive of that decision. And then there's all the gray space in the middle. Um, but one of the things that I find is so important for people, frankly, even right, if you're partnered and have a child, in terms of the experience of having a child in general, which I know you focus so much on too, right? That's why this podcast exists, is community and how important it is to have people around you. Where do you go for that support? How do you kind of create a village for yourself? And I think we're learning too, like, how to be flexible around, right? That village doesn't have to be your immediate family. That village can be people you know from church. It can be people who, right, have been good friends. I mean, how many of us have, right, aunts and uncles who are not biologically related, but, right? So identifying kind of community and support systems. And there are some great communities out there too that are specifically for people who have chosen to become single parents.
What I'm hearing you say, and I you tell me if I'm getting this right, and I will agree
Mhm.
with you preemptively, which is to make this kind of decision, it makes good sense to kind of think about it in advance, talk about it in advance, consider it in advance, which is what you find many of your clients are doing. And then there are ways to come up with the community piece that maybe we haven't thought of, maybe
Mhm.
are less traditional, that are really important. And honestly, like everybody living in their single family home with
Mhm.
just the four or five or however many of you there are
Mhm.
also isn't working so well for people.
Yeah.
um and back to that piece of like, well, we don't really think about it when you can just make a baby whenever you whenever you want. Nobody really thinks about this. But that nuclear family system doesn't
Mhm.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we introduce, so this is an example where we're introducing kind of another variable, single parent. I would argue, having a child with any kind of special needs um, is also another variable that
Mhm.
requires a deeper bench.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think from an anthropologic perspective, right, we are not meant to be doing what we are doing alone.
Yeah.
There is a reason why, you know, people used to live in communities and there were shared responsibilities. And, right, I think not in all cultures, but certainly in America, we really see kind of these single family homes and systems and there isn't that built-in kind of community that can come if you live in a multi-generational household or in a community, like even if you think about a kibbutz, right, where the mentality is we're all in this together, we're all going to watch each other's kids, we're all going to provide support, and the amount of stuff that families are doing, even with two parents, it's really not feasible to feel well balanced, to feel like everyone's needs are being met. And so, right, I think it doesn't work. And I think some of what I've actually seen recently in clients who are choosing to become single parents by choice is that they're also able to identify there are marriages and partnerships that don't work, right? That the quality of the parent-child interaction is so much more important than how many parents are involved. Um, and I have clients say one of the best things about being a single parent is like I get to make all the choices. I don't have to argue with a spouse about, right, or a partner about, where to send the child to school or what to dress the child in, right? Like some of those decisions that I almost feel bad for other friends, right, who I hear they're fighting with their partner and they want to handle things in different ways, right? There is some empowerment piece around the autonomy you have to kind of make some of those decisions.
Yeah, and
Um,
anybody who's had a parenting partner travel knows this.
yes,
They
yeah,
know that certain things are a lot easier when one person, one adult in particular, is out of the way.
yeah, you
Now,
get to do
yeah,
it in whatever way works for you, right?
yeah,
Um, but yes, I think to your point, we're really not meant to do everything that is required of us now to be parents, to work in or outside the house. There's so much that I think for everyone, the importance of support and community is so important. And I think oftentimes for people who are single parents by choice, that's actually something that they've thought a lot more about because they're anticipating how difficult it might be to kind of be solely responsible. And so oftentimes part of what we work on is right, what are the fears that you have? Are there fears that can kind of be used in a way to make you feel more supported, more empowered, more confident as you kind of go into whatever this process is going to entail, right? And even when people have made the choice to become a parent who is single, sometimes even the journey to get there continues to conflict with, okay, I've made this decision, now I'm going to get pregnant. That doesn't always happen easily, right, or smoothly. And so, again, even within that choice, there can still be kind of that, where does the expectation of what this is now going to look like, how does that fit or not fit kind of the reality of how things feel?
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, right? You make a decision, but then the decision has its own process
Yes.
until you reach the next milestone, which also has its own process.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And particularly, you and I were talking before we hit record about kind of stages of parenting.
Hmm.
Um, parenting a newborn is very different from a toddler, is very different from an elementary, middle, high school, and beyond.
Yeah.
And kind of what I again appreciate so much about your work is you are helping people think more broadly about these kinds of questions, not to solve the problems that arise,
Hmm.
but to meet them
Yeah.
with kind of knowledge of oneself, knowledge of one's values, it sounds like,
Hmm.
and the knowledge and ability to kind of cope and think through all of these various processes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I consider myself to be like a professional question asker because I really view my role as, right, so much of it, and it's different client to client. What are the things that are their values that really matter? What are the things they're right, wanting support with or not? And I feel like that should always be client directed. It's not up to me to decide what someone should be working on or not working on. But part of what I love is kind of being part of that process that you talked about. That is not always linear, right? I think that can be frustrating, right? It's like, okay, I started therapy, everything's gonna, right, just continue to feel better. And sometimes that's true, but oftentimes it isn't, right? It mimics real life where there are ups and downs and things can be complicated. And my job is to kind of know how and when and what to ask to have people think deeply about some of this stuff so that they can really feel empowered to make whatever decisions are the best for them to make and to feel well supported in making those decisions.
Mm, I love it. Shout out to you. Shout out to all of the social workers, because as far as I can tell in the mental health field, you all are the ones who have it mostly figured
Oh,
out.
I wish, but thank you.
Joanna Strait, if people want to learn more about you and your
Yeah.
practice, what do they do?
My practice is called Together Well. I'm online. My website is www.togetherwelltherapy.com. There's a contact form on there. I encourage people to reach out, even if they just have questions. Um, and I certainly am passionate about the maternal and reproductive mental health field. And so I am always happy to also be a resource for people, even if, right, that person is not me. Um, it's important to me to make sure people feel well supported. And so I'm also happy to help people get connected to whatever is going to be right for them.
We will link to certainly the website and your socials in the show notes.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.